Hi, my name is Jennifer Simpson, and welcome to another episode of Here's the Deal. Today, I am joined by Dr. Leora Fox, who is the Manager of Research and Mission Programs, and we're going to talk today a little bit about research. So I'm sure you might be thinking, Jen, we have had so many things about research recently. We've had webinars, we've had email blasts, we've had blog posts. Why are we talking about research? And the reason is we're not going to talk about all the nitty-gritty scientific details of what's going on in the HD science world, but we're really going to dive into the emotional impact of what's going on in the HD world, and especially in the research realm, because there's a lot going on, and I imagine for everybody this isn't necessarily a time of a lot of joy. And we want to give a little bit of an opportunity to talk about that. So, Leora, I am so happy that you are here with us today. Thank you for joining me. And so my first question that I want to ask you in the research world is, let's say, why might someone not be super excited about all the news and HD research that's come out?
So I'm very happy to be here. Thanks very much for having this conversation with me. I think that there are a lot of emotions that can come up around research news. When you get any announcements about, medical applications and medical research, you really start to kind of bring up these bigger questions about what does this mean for the future, whether that's for the community or for my family or for myself. And I think that there can be a lot of negativity around that. It's not always all hope and positivity and excitement. So I think, one thing is the anxiety that can just come along with not knowing what's going to happen with the research, not knowing whether it's going to benefit you or someone you love. I think there can sometimes be some frustration around, the sometimes perhaps the inability to participate in a particular trial that has a perceived, medical benefit to a person, or that is might be a great way to participate and lend yourself to research. I think there can be some anger maybe around how slowly things develop in research, and possibly some sadness around maybe there's someone in your life who you believe is sort of too ill to benefit from research, or has left this world and is not seeing all this excitement that's happening. So those are all totally valid reasons to experience some negativity around news and research.
Yeah, this can be a really kind of bittersweet moment for a lot of people in this community. You mentioned something really interesting, is that we're still in a place where we don't know. There's all this excitement, there's all this hope, about not just trials that are coming out, the progress of the Ionis trial, but also what's going on with WAVE. People aren't talking a lot about CRISPR, which again is something we really don't know a lot about in this community, but there's still a lot of questions we don't have answers to. We're hopeful, right? It's sort of this, right. We're in a better place than we've been in a long time, but we still don't know. Something that you also mentioned a little bit was timing. If I were in an HD family, I would be thinking, why is it that these next phases of trials are taking 25 months? Could possibly, maybe 30 months, however long these might take. Why? What makes it wait? Why so long? There are people who don't have that time, who might benefit from this drug, or who worry that they don't have this time. What is it about that length of time that a trial would say, okay, we can't run for only 12 months. We need to run for 25 months, or we need to run for 30 months. What's the significance of that?
Right. So I'll answer that question first. I think maybe we'll go back to your question about, this big question mark, which I think has really been historically something in HD and in HD families, this kind of overarching anxiety about the future and the unknown. And we're not really at a point in research where we can make any guarantees. As far as these trials lasting a long time and being really slow. So one of the things about HD is that, sometimes it can progress over the course of many years. And so right now, the ways that we have of, measuring how symptoms are developing and whether things could help symptoms, really have to kind of take into account how slowly the disease progresses. And so the first, trials, you mentioned particular trials, you mentioned Ionis. Right now it's the Roche Genentech team that's taking on this particular trial. And, not specifically to get into that particular trial, but any trial, really, once you get to a stage where you're done testing the safety in a small group of people and you want to move into understanding whether something's working, you need to see over rather a long period of time whether that's having any benefit. And, in particular, making these trials relatively long kind of ensures, a little bit more that you can really capture whether something's helping. And that can be really frustrating because it takes a long time to recruit. It takes a long time that the trial can be a really taxing thing for a person who's involved as well. But it really, in the end, is the most efficient way to see whether something works and whether it can benefit a much wider swath of humanity.
Yeah, so it's not, I can imagine someone in the HD community, or if this were me and my family, feel, having this feeling like I have a parent who's sick now, who could benefit now, and feeling that frustration at the time that all of this takes. I think we talk a bit in research from our perspective of how long HD research takes, and research generally, right? Once you go from an idea in a lab to a drug getting tested to a therapy going to market, could be like a decade.
A decade or more,
yeah,
absolutely.
It is. Science is slow. And we're towards the finish line. We're getting there now, but I think that's why sometimes people might feel like this heightened frustration.
Yeah.
That we're potentially, so close to something meaningful. Why do we have to keep waiting? Why are we, it can feel really, really difficult as a family member.
Right.
Waiting for all this to happen.
Yeah, so, I can speak a little bit to, this idea that someone who could potentially benefit from something now, not being able to participate. And I have to bring up the idea that a trial it's a trial. It's to understand whether this could benefit people. And the reason that those, sometimes these criteria for trials are so narrow is because we know that it's the most efficient way to get a drug to people as quickly as possible if it works. And all of these drug trials need to have groups of people who are not getting a drug. So there's this perception that someone who's participating in the trial is definitely going to get some benefit. We don't understand that yet. That's what this trial is testing. Yeah. And it's also they're going to be different test groups in there. But it's a completely valid frustration to have, and we're hearing that a lot from the community. So if you're feeling like that, you're absolutely not alone.
Yeah. And you bring up a really good point that I think we all get excited about how, in theory, these different therapies, whether it's an ASO or something else that is in the pipeline, make a lot of sense, right? In theory, these things should work, and we know they're safe, and we hope that it's something that will target the cause of the disease, that will stop the progression, but we don't know yet. Again, these are all we get so excited about how in theory this sounds so good and it sounds like it will work, but we still don't know in practice whether it works yet, right? A trial is a trial because we just don't know.
Yes, and safety is obviously going to be the primary concern. Even for these longer trials, we need to know whether it's safe to give a treatment for longer than the initial safety trial, and that's part of an efficacy trial as well. Yeah. But they do require a lot of patience and time.
So I'm thinking also, if I were to put myself in the shoes of someone who is, let's, in a hypothetical scenario, I am a person who is gene positive and I'm maybe 35 or around that age. I might not be diagnostically symptomatic, right? But I might be in sort of some prodromal phases or completely pre-symptomatic. And I might be feeling that time pressure, right? We talked about how science takes time and science is slow, and that is deeply frustrating. And I might not be, and I've given some criteria, I might not be eligible for some of the drug trials that are coming out now. Is there anything I can do? what can people do in the sort of research vein to help with some of that anxiety that they might be feeling, that kind of impotent anxiety of, I'm not symptomatic yet, but I'm really worried about when that comes, whether I'll be prepared, whether there'll be something for me when I'm there, when I'm at that point.
Yeah, so, even though I'm on the research side, I have to, always encourage people to engage their support network over those feelings of anxiety around this stuff, whatever that means for an individual, whether, it's a friend or a therapist or something like that. Because it really, it's a big emotional question. And as far as participating in research now or engaging with research now, if you're watching this video, you're already engaging in the community and engaging in a discussion about this. So that's really awesome. As far as actual, research participation, I'm always going to harp on Enroll HD, and I know that people have heard about it, many times at this point. But it is a really excellent way to get involved in research that doesn't require testing. You can, be at risk. You can be asymptomatic. You can be pre-symptomatic. You can be in an HD family. That is an excellent way to get involved, and I can talk a little more about, why we keep harping on Enroll HD.
Yeah, Leora, why do we keep talking about this?
So just as a reminder, Enroll HD is a large worldwide observational study for HD families. Mm-hmm. Observational study just means that there's no drug being given, there's no intervention. It's simply measuring people's symptoms and reactions over a long period of time, if possible. What that means practically is that a person visits a center, and there are these Enroll HD sites all around the world. They visit once a year and spend 1 to 2 hours with an expert team of HD clinician researchers who do different kinds of tests on movement and cognition and sometimes imaging tests and blood work and stuff. And it's in addition to being just an awesome way to kind of contribute to the larger body of knowledge about HD, which is helping us understand things like, why does the trial need to be so long? Mm-hmm. Or, what's the best way to measure progression of symptoms? That's what Enroll HD is really helping us do, is to design more efficient, better trials and, to understand what kinds of care and what kinds of things influence people's progression. So that is kind of on the sort of larger research contribution scale. But on a personal level, it's also, and especially if you live in an area that doesn't have, excellent access to expert HD teams, it's a really great way to be seen by an expert team once a year. It's not, it shouldn't replace any kind of primary care. Mm-hmm. But it's also a way to be involved at a center that's doing research. And those are the places where drug trials happen. And while we can't, there's no guarantee, HDSA doesn't have any control over where, pharma companies pick to do their trials and where the trial sites are, but we can, we know that that's a great way to be at a place where those things have the potential to happen. So there's kind of this, larger contribution as well as potentially some personal benefit from that. So that's why we always harp on Enroll HD. As far as, talking about other ways to participate in research, the engagement with, what's going on around you and what is happening is actually really valuable, whether that means that you can be a source of information, whether it's something that's been vetted by HDSA or it's through, one of our partners that we support, like HD Buzz, is just a really valuable way to, spread good knowledge about research. We have a weekly research blog. We have webinars about research, and this can really be informative about what's kind of like coming through the pipeline. Mm-hmm. We really like to pick things that we feel have, some kind of medical potential. So that's kind of, a way to get in on what's happening early and to know about it. There's also, in terms of participation, a lot of upcoming studies are going to require a sort of wingman. You know, it's going to be somebody needs a study companion, whether that means driving somebody to their appointment for a research study, or answering some questions for the doctors who are conducting the study, or even something as simple as being that support person, being there for somebody who's engaging in a long and difficult study, whatever it is. That's really valuable. We also have, there are ways that we maintain a site called HD Trial Finder, and we keep up to date on all of the studies that are going on all over the U.S. and Canada, and we really try to have our finger on the pulse of that. So we make that information available, and that's a way to know not only about these drug trials, but there are lots of small trials going on in communities all over the place, maybe at one site, trying some kind of intervention, a device, even just measuring what's going on with a certain set of people, and that's another great way to participate that doesn't always require somebody to be gene positive or symptomatic necessarily. There are also, because there's so much attention being drawn to the HD research community right now, which is really awesome. There are, for example, genetic counseling students all over the country that are coming up with research surveys, that are really well researched and that are, have been vetted by university boards, and that we post on our website. So there's lots of ways to be involved in HD research that can be meaningful.
Yeah, I'm thinking, in terms of, if I were someone who was feeling that kind of impotent anxiety, that comes from the feeling of I can't do anything, I am helpless, and being able to find something to participate in, whether it's a different type of, whether it's a drug trial, whether it's an observational trial, whether it's doing surveys or small studies that you can do from your own home, whether it's helping out a family member get to their enroll appointment, or doing that together so that you both go and make sure you get that appointment, make sure you are there for your yearly enroll visit. Like, there's a way to kind of feel like, okay, I'm not passive anymore. I'm being active. I am doing something that hopefully will benefit me, but if it doesn't, it will benefit someone. It could be it'll benefit my niece or nephew, or my son or daughter, or some stranger I don't know, but it'll be to the benefit of somebody.
I totally agree. That's the goal of all research, is to have it be towards the benefit of everyone in the end. And in the ultimate goal, I think, of the whole research community is to come up with a treatment that could be given before any symptoms occur. So any research participation and any study is really contributing towards this body of knowledge that allows that to happen quickly and efficiently, and to explore as many research paths as possible. And I can certainly say that the research community's eggs are not all in one basket. There are lots of big profile things happening in the news, but there are many avenues of research that are being explored in hundreds of laboratories all over the world, and that are presented at conferences every year. And we're following those, and as much as anyone wants to follow those, we can help provide information about that. And there's a lot of cool stuff going on that's very helpful. So.
Yeah. So it's not sort of, okay, we're all waiting for this one thing, and if this one thing doesn't work, we're back to square one.
Certainly not.
Yeah. So something I also wanted to touch on was this idea of criteria. I think there are definitely people in the community, or again, if I try and put myself in those shoes, thinking, if my mother or my father were symptomatic but were towards mid to late stage, thinking, they are they're very ill, they need help, why wouldn't they be able to be part of this study? Why would they exclude those folks? Or saying, even if they can't be part of the study, why can't a company just give someone drug, for a compassionate use, to say, I understand that you're ill. This might maybe help somewhat. Here, you can have it. What would be the reason for not doing that?
Yeah, so it's a good question, and compassionate use is a really interesting idea in the HD field right now, and especially with lots of sort of unexplored types of drugs that are coming up. These kind of genetically modifying types of drugs are super new. We don't really have a lot of precedent. That's one thing that the HD research community is right on the forefront of that. But that means that we really don't have any good indication of whether this is a safe thing to use over many years, whatever it is. And that would be the main reason that a company would decide not to do that, is to, we don't understand what the value of a drug is yet, whether it can help somebody and whether it will be safe. And safety is everyone's primary concern in those cases. As far as eligibility, I can reiterate and just explain a little bit more that when a trial is conducted, usually symptomatic people are chosen to be in that trial, early symptomatic people in particular, for some of these trials. So that's not always the case. But the reason is that that's a time when we can measure whether something's having a benefit, and when we can expect that somebody might have the greatest benefit from it. That's not to say that any drug that's being tested couldn't benefit a much broader part of the community, whether that means somebody in a later stage or somebody even in the future who is pre-symptomatic, and what that'll look like. It's very hard to say from this perspective, but basically the company and the community's goal is always to as quickly and efficiently as possible make a drug available if it's a good drug, right? So
very important caveat.
Right. That there's always this big if, and that's an important thing to remember as well. But that's the reason that these criteria are so narrow, and that can definitely be very frustrating. But what that will ensure is that we'll get an answer as quickly as possible and as correctly as possible in a very specific population.
Yeah, so it's sort of like this group has sort of the best observable symptom change, if any, occurs, and sort of the best measurable changes.
Right.
To be able to determine, like,
exactly.
Okay, X has happened, Y has happened, or X or Y has not happened.
Right.
And we have a problem.
The change and the benefit are the two main things.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I was wondering, so if, let's say Company Z is testing an HD drug, and I have applied for compassionate use, the FDA has said, yeah, sure, fine, because that's what they tend to do. They approve like 99.6% of compassionate use requests. But then Company Z says, we're still in the trial phase. We can't give you, or we don't want to give you this drug because of the fact that there is an ongoing trial. If I were to get that drug, would I then have to be reported as part of that trial data? And if something went wrong with me, or I had a terrible reaction, would that then also have to be reported as part of trial data? Like, I can see that being a reason to say, oh gosh, we have this controlled group. We don't want to add, or it could be harmful to add outlier X over here into this controlled population.
Right. So as far as trial design, I'm afraid that I don't have the expertise to answer your question as directly as you asked it. But I think that that is indeed up to the pharma company, and they do indeed. And I don't know exactly how that reporting works. Is what I mean to say. I don't know if that data becomes part of the trial, or if it simply needs to be reported. But it's certainly a really important it's a really important point that they would have to report anything that happened. It could stop a whole trial if somebody for whom the drug was not, yet indicated, had a really severe reaction or something that could, delay research for many years. That's a possibility. But as far as, the actual how that reporting works, I'm afraid is not my exact area of expertise.
But the point being, like, if something terrible happened to someone who maybe got a drug through compassionate use, maybe it wasn't indicated for them, that would be something that could impact a trial.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that might be a reason to say, it's not someone being heartless. It's not someone saying you don't deserve or you're not, anything like that. But it's wanting to maintain that controlled grouping.
Correct.
And trying not to, because that, again, derailing a trial could be something that impacts not just those people within the trial, but the larger population that is trying to serve.
Right. And I think we tend to see, these pharmaceutical entities as kind of, behind this sort of
like the great and powerful Oz or something.
Yeah, exactly. But it's really, they're made up of teams of very smart and compassionate people who have the interests of the community at heart, absolutely, and who are, considering how do we best move forward so that this can be, available to those who need it.
Yeah. So, if you're feeling that frustration at lack of compassionate use, if you're feeling anger, which, again, completely understandable and very legitimate, but to have that in your mind, like, it's not as though someone is trying to deny you something.
Right.
Or it's not as though there is sort of a larger sort of shadow pharma cabal trying to say, you don't get drug, or you're not worthy, or we're being greedy about something. But it's really trying to make sure that the interests of the community are always kept at the forefront, and remembering that in order to preserving sort of the sanctity of that trial and the purity of the trial is really important in order to best serve the needs of the community as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you said it just right.
Thank you. Oh my gosh. That means a lot to me from a doctor that I got a research thing right. Thanks. Yeah. So I think something that I really wanted sort of to use this conversation to harp on was that if you are feeling mixed emotions about the research news, about all of this, if people are coming up to you and saying, "Oh my gosh, Leora, I heard this great news about HD. They've cured HD. This is so great." And in the back of your mind, you're thinking, "No, we haven't. We haven't done that yet." And there are still a lot of unknowns. And I'm feeling a ton of anxiety and maybe some anger and disappointment that this isn't going to help, my grandparent or my parent who might have already passed on or might be in a late stage in a nursing home. That it's okay to feel those things. It's
absolutely,
and it's deeply understandable to have this be a very bittersweet time for a lot of people in the community, and to have those kind of recurring feelings of maybe anger, anxiety as this process moves forward. And like you said, one of the ways to try and keep yourself, to manage those feelings, is to reach out to your support network, right?
Yes.
I know I've talked about this in like every video we've made, the importance of therapy. But to have those resources available to you, whether it's, through a private therapist that you see, whether it's through an HDSA social worker, whether it's through an online support forum, get what you need, because it's incredibly important. So step 1, enroll HD.
Step 1 is always going to be enroll HD until we don't need enroll HD anymore.
Great. Okay. Well, Leora, I want to thank you for taking the time to sit with me today and to talk a little bit about the emotional impact of research and kind of helping us walk people in the community through how that might be making them feel and why those reactions are completely normal and completely understandable, and to not feel like they're alone in maybe feeling a little bit bittersweet about what's going on in the HD research community today. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And I just want to say that there are a lot of compassionate researchers out there who are on everyone's side as well. And so that is, another message of hope that the community should keep in mind.
Thank you again. And that's the deal with HD research.